I believe even now, you're about to step into some of this beauty. Things that were meant to harm you, struggles that have tried to discourage you, people that did you wrong, bad breaks that should have limited your life. This is a new day. God is doing a new thing. You're about to see vindication, restoration, new opportunities, divine connections. The tide is turning in your favor. What was meant for your harm, God is turning to your advantage. There's a couple that have a son. He was raised here at Lakewood. They're very faithful. But when he went off to college, he started running with the wrong crowd, partying, making poor decisions. One thing led to another. He ended up with a drug addiction. His parents tried to help him, but he wouldn't have anything to do with them. He got to the point where he wouldn't speak to them or have any kind of contact. It was breaking their hearts. They would come down for prayer week after week. They couldn't understand it. They had done the right thing, and now the wrong thing happened. They could have been bitter, complained, God, where were you? But they just kept doing the right thing, being faithful, serving, giving, helping others. The scripture says that God is the potter and we are the clay. There's nothing really beautiful about the clay. It's just a lump of hard dirt, some rocks in it, no form. But the potter puts the clay on the wheel and begins to spin it around and around. While it's spinning, the clay is still wobbly, still has lumps, still doesn't look like much. But the potter never takes his hands off the clay. He keeps making it and molding it until it begins to take shape. If someone came up to the potter, saw the clay going around, they would think, you're wasting your time. That's just a bunch of clay. That's never going to amount to much. The potter would say, just give me some time. You see clay, but I see something beautiful. You see a bunch of dirt, but I see a valuable vase. This young man was off course, making poor decisions. But God is the potter. He never takes his hands off the clay. Even though it's wobbly, even though it has lumps, even though it falls down and he has to reshape it, he keeps working. All those times you thought that God had forgotten about you. The truth is, God still had his hands on you. When you weren't making good decisions, when you were running with the wrong crowd, giving into the temptation, the potter didn't throw you out because you're clay, because he found some lumps. You have faults and weaknesses. His hands have always been on you. And the good news is, he's never going to take his hands off of you. The scripture says his calling on your life is irrevocable. He's going to keep making you and molding you. In the same way, the potter's hands are on your children. They may get off course, but the potter doesn't give up on the clay. He just spins it around a little bit more. These parents understood what Solomon said, that there's a time for weeping, a time for loss, a time for disappointment, but that is not the end of the story. God also said he will make all things beautiful in its time. There's a time for restoration, a time for healing, a time for deliverance, a time for celebration. Their attitude was, God, we don't understand it, but we trust you. We know that you're in control, that you won't take your hands off of our son, that you will keep making him and molding him. After 13 years of barely speaking to them, one day he called and said he wanted to come home. He wanted to make things right. He got back in church. He went to treatment. He's been free for 6 years now. Today, he's helping other young people get free. If you will stay in faith and give God the time, he'll make all things beautiful. Like this couple, you may have relationships that are strained, family members that won't have anything to do with you. You think it's always going to be that way. You're about to write them off. No, keep loving them. Keep being good to them. Keep praying. Keep forgiving. Stay on the high road. God sees what's happening. He knows how to restore. He knows how to change people's hearts. His hands are still on them. They may need to go around the world a few more times. The timing is not up to us, it's up to God. Will you wait for his plan to unfold? Will you not get discouraged? Is it going to happen? Why isn't it improving? It just needs some time. and you understand this principle, it takes the pressure off. You won't get frustrated, wondering how it's going to work out. You'll say, God, everything's not perfect in my life. I'm waiting for things to change, but I'm going to enjoy today knowing that you're on the throne. And at the right time, you're going to make all things beautiful in my life. In Exodus 15, Moses was leading the Israelites to the promised land. They were in the desert, so hot and thirsty. They didn't think they were going to make it. They desperately needed water. They finally came to this river. They were so excited. They rushed over to it, but the water was bitter. They couldn't drink it. Their excitement turned to great disappointment. God told Moses to put a certain kind of tree in the water. When he did, the bitter waters became sweet. Now the people could drink all the water that they wanted. God knows how to take a bitter situation and make it sweet. A bitter loss, a bitter breakup, a bitter childhood. It looks like that's your destiny. Just learn to live with it. In the natural, that's true, but God is supernatural. That water should be bitter, but when God touches it, the bitterness will turn sweet. The relationship will be restored. The child will come home. The dream will come to pass. The scripture says, after the Israelites left Marah, where the water was bitter, they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees. They came out of the bitterness into an oasis. It was like a resort. I can imagine them thinking, how did this place ever make it into the desert? The principle is, God is going to bring you out of the bitter places of life, not just to where you were, but to an oasis, to an abundance, joy, health, fulfillment like you've never seen. It's going to be a time of refreshing, re-energizing, enjoyment that you've never experienced. When God makes all things beautiful, it's going to exceed your expectations. Relationships healthier than ever. Your children doing awesome things. Going further in your career. Stepping into new levels of your destiny. From bitter waters to sweet waters. From the desert to an oasis. That's how God restores. That's his idea of beauty. In the scripture, the Apostle Paul chose Barnabas and his cousin John Mark to travel with him. Paul could have chosen anyone. He was very influential, very respected. They went to different cities ministering and were having great success. But when Paul decided to sail to the city of Perga, the scripture says that John Mark deserted him. Doesn't give any reason. He just went back home to Jerusalem. Paul was upset. He thought, at least you could tell me you're going to leave. After all, I chose you, took you under my wing, shared my influence with you. Now you're just going to walk away? Later, Paul was about to return to a city to check on how things were going. Barnabas said, let's take John Mark with us. Paul wasn't so forgiving. He said, in effect, no way. You're not coming back on my team. After he deserted me, I'm done with him. It was such a sharp disagreement that Paul and Barnabas split up. They were so at odds, they no longer traveled together. Paul chose Silas. Barnabas chose John Mark. They went their separate ways. You don't hear much more about Barnabas and John Mark. But Paul and Silas, they did great things. Saw one miracle after another. When they were in prison at midnight, they sang praises and the prison doors were open. When they were shipwrecked on the island of Malta, poisonous snake bit Paul. He shook it off, didn't harm him. He prayed and all the sick people on the island were healed. There are chapters and chapters of how God used him. Paul went on to write almost half of the books in the New Testament. I can imagine John Mark thinking, man, I blew it. Why didn't I stick with Paul? Why did I desert him? At least I should have thanked him for choosing me, told him that I wanted to go back home and not just disappear. It seemed like his own mistakes, his own poor choices had soured this relationship and limited his destiny. We can all look back like John Mark and think, man, if I'd only stayed in that relationship, if I'd only been more committed in my marriage, if I'd only spent more time with my children, if I'd only finished college, where could I be now? But God has a way of making all things beautiful. Even mistakes that we've made, even our own shortcomings, things that we know we should have done better. John Mark was down on himself. And he heard how great Paul was doing, how he was impacting cities. It was like pouring salt in the wound. He thought, that could have been me. Fast forward many years later, Paul is now an old man. He's in prison and about to pass. He's writing to Timothy and says, I've finished my course. I've run my race. He went on to say, Timothy, when you come, bring the coat I left at Troas. Bring my books and my papers. And one more thing, bring John Mark with you, for he is very profitable to me. Of all the things he could have asked for at the end of his life, he asked for John Mark. I can imagine word getting to him. You're not going to believe this, but Paul is asking for you. He wants me to bring you. John Mark says, don't treat me like that. You know I blew it with Paul. No, I'm not kidding. Timothy sent the message. Paul wants you to come. He says that you are very valuable to him. I can see tears welling up in his eyes. Paul wasn't so forgiving early on. He didn't want to have anything to do with John Mark. But God knows how to soften people's hearts. He knows how to give them another chance. In his time, he will make all things beautiful. You may have relationships that you think are too far gone. Too much water under the bridge. You messed up. They're not going to have anything to do with you. No, another chance is coming. You wouldn't be hearing this if God wasn't about to do something unusual. Something out of the ordinary. John Mark thought that he had missed his chance. That his bad choices stopped his purpose. And here's how good God is. He not only saw his relationship with Paul restored, but most scholars believe that he wrote the Gospel of Mark. Who would have ever thought that after deserting Paul, after causing a disagreement that caused Barnabas to break away, that one day, many years later, we'd be reading the book that he wrote? What am I saying? God knows how to make all things beautiful. Just give it some time. Well, Joel, this is encouraging, but I think it's too late for me. You don't know what I've done, the relationships I've soured, the regrets that I had. Your mistakes are not too much for the mercy of God. Your shortcomings, your failures, your lack of commitment did not stop your destiny. God is softening hearts right now. He's preparing the way for restoration. Timothy sent word, go find John Mark. Tell them that Paul says he's profitable, he's valuable, that he needs them. God is calling your name today. Go find Linda. Go find Philip. Go find Rolando. Tell them that they're valuable, that I have another chance, that I'm going to restore or restore. It's not too late. You haven't made too many mistakes. Like John Mark, your latter days are going to be better than your former days. Mistakes you've made in the past are not going to keep you from the great things God has in store. Now, maybe you're not John Mark in this story, you're Paul. God is saying, give them another chance. Show mercy. It's time to forgive. It's time to release the hurt. It's time to bury that hatchet. This is a new day. As you forgive, God is going to make things beautiful in your life. You're not just doing them a favor, you're doing yourself a favor. Make that call. Tell your child, your parent, your friend, that you need them, that they're valuable to you. God didn't put them in your life by accident. And the mercy you show them is the mercy that's going to be shown you. Life is flying by. Time is short. They're not always going to be here. Paul waited till he was almost done. But he couldn't really say, I have finished my course, without saying, go get John Mark. He was saying, I'm not going to die holding this against him, letting him think that I'm disappointed in him, trying to keep him feeling guilty, condemned. I'm bigger than that. I'm done holding on to things that are holding me down. When John Mark came and felt Paul's love and acceptance, gifts that had been buried in him came alive. Vision that lay dormant came back to life. He stepped up and wrote his book, saw God's favor in new ways. I believe today God is about to make some things beautiful in your life.